The defendant's chair crashed backward as he exploded toward the exit, his dress shoes slapping against marble in a desperate sprint for freedom. I'm Adam Broderick, court reporter for the Providence Journal, and what I witnessed that sweltering August morning would become the most talked-about moment in Providence Municipal Court history, the day the beloved Judge Frank Caprio finally broke. If you know anything about Rhode Island courts, you know Judge Caprio. The man's a legend, compassionate, understanding. The judge who's gone viral countless times for giving people second chances, reducing fines for struggling families, dismissing tickets for Good Samaritans. He's the grandfather figure of the Rhode Island justice system, the judge who leads with his heart. But what Marcus Delaney didn't understand, what he was about to learn in the most brutal way possible, was that compassion has limits. And when you cross Judge Frank Caprio, when you spit in the face of the mercy he's built his reputation on, you don't just face a judge's anger. You face the fury of a man whose trust you've shattered. Let me give you context, because you need to understand who Judge Caprio is to appreciate the magnitude of what happened that day. Frank Caprio has served the Providence Municipal Court for over 30 years. He's not just a judge, he's an institution. The man has presided over hundreds of thousands of cases, and his philosophy has always been simple. Treat people with dignity, understand their circumstances, and remember that everyone deserves compassion. I've watched him tear up listening to a single mother's struggles. I've seen him waive fines for veterans down on their luck. Hell, I watched him give a defendant money out of his own pocket once so the guy could feed his kids. Judge Caprio doesn't just believe in second chances, he's made a career of handing them out, which is exactly why Marcus Delaney's case ended up in his courtroom. Delaney, 34, was facing charges for a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting elderly residents in Providence's Federal Hill neighborhood. The allegations were serious. He'd allegedly posed as a city housing inspector, convincing vulnerable seniors they needed immediate, expensive repairs, then disappearing with their money. The prosecution estimated he'd stolen nearly $200,000 from 17 victims. But here's the thing. Delaney had no prior criminal record, not even a parking ticket. His public defender, Maria Santos, had painted a picture of a man who'd fallen into financial desperation after losing his construction business during the pandemic. She argued he'd made terrible choices, but deserved a chance at redemption. And Judge Caprio, true to form, had listened. Against the prosecutor's vehement objections, Judge Caprio had granted bail. He'd looked Delaney in the eye during that bail hearing 3 months earlier and said something I wrote down word for word. "Mr. Delaney, I'm going to give you a chance to do the right thing. Use this time to reflect, to make amends if you can, and to prepare for your day in court. Don't make me regret this decision." Delaney had stood there, tears in his eyes, and promised he wouldn't. He'd thanked Judge Caprio profusely. He'd sworn on his children's lives that he would show up for every hearing, that he'd prove the judge's faith wasn't misplaced. For 3 months, he'd kept that promise. He'd appeared at every pre-trial hearing, always on time, always respectful. Judge Caprio had even commented on it during the last hearing, telling Delaney he appreciated his commitment to following through. That's what made what happened next so devastating. August 14th started like any other day in Courtroom 3A. Judge Caprio took the bench at 9 sharp, greeting everyone with his characteristic warmth. "Good morning, everyone. Beautiful day outside. Let's make it a good day in here, too." The morning docket was routine. Traffic violations, minor disputes, small claims hearings. Judge Caprio worked through them with his usual blend of wisdom and humor, making people smile even as he held them accountable. Delaney's case was scheduled for 10:30. It was supposed to be a simple pre-trial conference, nothing dramatic. His attorney, Maria Santos, had filed a motion to suppress certain evidence, and both sides were expected to argue their positions. 15 minutes, maybe 20, and everyone moves on. Delaney arrived 10 minutes early, which was normal. He was wearing a gray suit, cheap but clean. He sat next to Santos at the defense table, occasionally whispering to her, nodding as she explained what would happen. Judge Caprio called the case at exactly 10:30. "Commonwealth versus Marcus Delaney. Counsel, are we ready to proceed?" The prosecutor, Assistant DA James Rivera, stood. "Ready, Your Honor." Maria Santos stood. "Ready, Your Honor." Judge Caprio smiled at Delaney. "Mr. Delaney, good to see you again. Still showing up when you're supposed to. I appreciate that." Delaney nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Those would be the last civil words exchanged for quite some time. Rivera had just started his argument, something about the admissibility of bank records, when it happened. I was taking notes, my attention split between the prosecutor's words and my laptop screen when I heard it. The scrape of a chair, sharp, sudden. My head snapped up just in time to see Delaney launch himself from the defense table like he'd been catapulted. His shoulder caught Maria Santos in the side, sending her stumbling into the table. Papers flew everywhere, briefs, evidence files, scattered like confetti. But Delaney wasn't stopping. He was already past the rail separating the well of the court from the gallery, his arms pumping, his cheap dress shoes pounding the floor. The courtroom wasn't large, maybe 40 feet from the defense table to the rear exit. Delaney covered half that distance in seconds, moving with the manic speed of pure desperation. "Stop!" The bailiff, Officer Ray Moretti, a stocky guy about 10 years from retirement, moved to intercept, but he was positioned near the judge's bench. No way he'd get there in time. The second bailiff, Officer Linda Chen, was stationed near the exit. She moved into Delaney's path, her hands up. "Don't do this!" But Delaney juked right, and Chen, trying to grab his jacket, caught only air. His hand closed around the door handle and pulled. Nothing happened. The magnetic locks activated the instant Moretti hit his emergency button, held firm. Delaney yanked again, harder, his face contorting with panic. Then again, and again. By the fourth pull, both bailiffs had reached him. Moretti grabbed his left arm, Chen his right, and they wrestled him to the ground as he struggled and shouted incoherently. The entire escape attempt, from movement to capture, lasted maybe 12 seconds. But in those 12 seconds, something in Judge Frank Caprio broke. I've covered Judge Caprio for 8 years. I've seen him emotional, seen him stern, seen him disappointed. But I had never seen what I saw on his face when Delaney was dragged back to the front of the courtroom. He was standing, not sitting. Standing at the bench, both hands flat on its surface, his shoulders rigid, his face a mask of barely contained rage. But here's what made it truly terrifying. He wasn't yelling. Judge Caprio wasn't shouting or pounding his gavel or red-faced with anger. He was silent, completely, utterly silent. And somehow, that silence was more devastating than any explosion could have been. The bailiffs hauled Delaney to his feet and positioned him directly in front of the bench. His suit jacket was torn, his hair disheveled, his face a mixture of fear and shame. Maria Santos stood at the defense table, her hand over her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. For what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 seconds, Judge Caprio just stared at Delaney. The courtroom was frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. When Judge Caprio finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear it. "Mr. Delaney." Each syllable was measured, controlled. "Look at me." Delaney, who'd been staring at the floor, slowly raised his eyes. "I want you to think very carefully about what I'm going to ask you," Judge Caprio continued, still in that terrifyingly quiet voice. "And I want you to understand that how you answer will matter. Do you understand?" Delaney nodded. "Out loud, please." "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Caprio's hands remained flat on the bench, but I could see them trembling slightly. 3 months ago, I stood here and made a decision that my colleagues warned me against. The prosecutor, he gestured to Rivera, argued strenuously that you were a flight risk, that I shouldn't grant you bail. Do you remember that? "Yes, Your Honor," Delaney whispered. "I overruled that objection, Mr. Delaney. I looked at your record, no priors. I listened to your attorney's arguments, and I looked at you. I looked you in the eye, and I saw something I thought was genuine remorse. Genuine intention to do the right thing." Judge Caprio's voice was rising now, the control starting to crack. "I told you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I told you that I was giving you a chance, that I was trusting you. Do you remember what you said to me?" Delaney's face was streaming with tears now. I said I wouldn't let you down. You said you wouldn't let me down." The explosion finally came, Judge Caprio's voice filling every corner of the courtroom. "You swore on your children that you would honor this court's trust. You thanked me. You stood right there and thanked me for believing in you." Judge Caprio removed his glasses, and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of anger, of betrayal, of profound disappointment. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked, his voice dropping back to that dangerous quiet. "Do you have any comprehension of what you've just destroyed?" Delaney opened his mouth, but Judge Caprio cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm not talking about your case. Though God knows you've just demolished any chance you had at a fair trial. I'm not even talking about your freedom, though you've just guaranteed you'll lose that too." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Delaney. "I'm talking about trust, Mr. Delaney. I'm talking about the foundation upon which this entire system is built. I'm talking about every other defendant who will stand before me asking for compassion, asking for a second chance, asking me to see their humanity." His voice was rising again. "How am I supposed to look at them and grant bail? How am I supposed to trust anyone after what you just did? You didn't just betray me, you betrayed every single person who will come after you, every defendant who actually deserves mercy." The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for the sound of Delaney's sobbing. "For 30 years, Judge Caprio continued, his voice breaking with emotion, I have built a reputation in this court based on one simple principle: that people deserve to be treated with dignity, that everyone makes mistakes, that compassion and justice can coexist. Do you know how many judges have told me I'm too soft? How many prosecutors have complained that I give too many breaks?" He gestured around the courtroom. "And every time, I defend my decisions. I stand by my belief that most people, given a chance, will do the right thing. You know what makes that possible? Trust. The belief that when someone looks me in the eye and makes me a promise, they mean it." Judge Caprio's voice dropped to a whisper. "You just took that from me." Judge Caprio straightened up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. When he spoke again, the emotion was locked down, replaced by cold judicial authority. "Marcus Delaney, your bail is hereby revoked, effective immediately. You will be remanded to the custody of the Rhode Island Department of Corrections pending trial." Delaney's knees buckled, and the bailiffs had to hold him up. "Furthermore, I am charging you with attempted escape, contempt of court, and assault on a court officer. The assault charge refers to your contact with Ms. Santos during your escape attempt. These charges will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Rivera, I'm sure you'll have no trouble adding these charges to the existing indictment." Rivera, who'd been standing silently throughout the entire exchange, nodded vigorously. "None whatsoever, Your Honor." "Ms. Santos," Judge Caprio said, his voice softening slightly as he addressed the public defender, "I know you had no knowledge of your client's intentions. However, I need you to explain to Mr. Delaney exactly what he's done to his case." Maria Santos, still pale and shaken, nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Because let me be clear for the record," Judge Caprio said, his attention back on Delaney. "At your trial, which will proceed as scheduled in 3 weeks, the prosecution will introduce evidence of your escape attempt. The jury will hear how you tried to flee justice, and they will draw their own conclusions about your guilt." He paused, letting that sink in. "An innocent man doesn't run, Mr. Delaney, and you just ran." But Judge Caprio wasn't quite finished. He did something then that I'd never seen him do in 8 years of coverage. He addressed the entire courtroom directly. "I want everyone here to understand something," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "What happened today doesn't just affect Mr. Delaney. It affects every person who will stand before this court asking for mercy. It affects the victims in this case, who now have to watch this spectacle. And it affects me, personally." He looked around the gallery, making eye contact with various people. "I am not a naive man. I've been doing this for 3 decades. I know some people will take advantage of compassion. I know some people will lie, will manipulate, will abuse the trust given to them. But I've always believed, I've chosen to believe, that most people are fundamentally good, that most people, given a genuine opportunity, will rise to the occasion." His voice cracked again. "What Mr. Delaney has done today makes it harder for me to maintain that belief. And that, more than anything else, is what I find unforgivable." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Officer Moretti, the tough-as-nails bailiff, was wiping at his face. Judge Caprio turned back to Delaney one final time. "Do you have anything to say before I finalize these orders?" Delaney, barely able to stand, looked up at the judge. "Judge Caprio, I'm so sorry. I panicked. I wasn't thinking. I couldn't face going to prison. I have kids. I just panicked. Please, I'm so sorry. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change. Your panic is understandable, Mr. Delaney, but it doesn't excuse what you did. And your apology, while perhaps sincere, comes too late. You had 3 months to make the right choices. You had every opportunity to prove you were worthy of the trust I placed in you. Instead, you waited until you were in my courtroom, surrounded by officers, to make the worst decision of your life. He picked up his gavel. The court's orders stand. Bail revoked. Additional charges filed. Trial date unchanged. Bailiffs, please remove Mr. Delaney and begin the processing for his transfer to the ACI. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo forever. This court will take a 30-minute recess. Judge Caprio rose and walked to his chambers without another word, his shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. The story exploded across Rhode Island and beyond. National news picked it up. "Beloved judge's emotional response to courtroom escape," read the headlines. Video clips from the courtroom went viral, though they couldn't quite capture the emotional weight of being there in person. But the real impact was felt in Providence. Everyone knew Judge Caprio. Everyone had a story about him, or knew someone who had been helped by his compassion. The idea that someone had betrayed his trust so completely, so publicly, struck a nerve. I spoke with dozens of people in the days after. Other judges told me they understood exactly what Judge Caprio had felt, that terrible moment when someone you tried to help throws it back in your face. Defense attorneys worried about how the incident would affect future bail decisions, not just in Judge Caprio's courtroom, but across the system. Victims in Delaney's case told me they felt vindicated, but also sad that it had come to this. 3 weeks later, the trial proceeded. Delaney appeared in Prison Orange, chained and defeated. The jury heard all the evidence, the fraud scheme, the vulnerable victims, the stolen money. And yes, they heard about the escape attempt. It took them 90 minutes to convict on all counts. At sentencing, Judge Caprio did something unusual. Before imposing sentence, he spoke directly to Delaney one more time. "Mr. Delaney, I've thought a lot about what happened in this courtroom. I've questioned my own judgment. I've wondered if I was wrong to grant you bail in the first place, if I ignored warning signs, if I let my desire to see the good in people cloud my reasoning." He paused. "And I've concluded that I wasn't wrong to give you a chance. I was wrong about you specifically, but I wasn't wrong to try. Because if I stop trying, if I stop believing that people can change, then I've lost something essential, not just as a judge, but as a human being." Delaney was crying again, but Judge Caprio's face was impassive. "That said, you will face the consequences of your choices. For the fraud charges, I sentence you to 10 years in state prison. For the attempted escape, contempt, and assault charges, I add an additional 5 years to run consecutively. Total sentence, 15 years. The number hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Delaney collapsed into his chair, his attorney holding his shoulder. "I hope," Judge Caprio said quietly, "that you use this time to reflect on what trust means, what compassion means, and what you threw away. This court is adjourned." I'm Adam Broderick, and I've been covering courts for over 2 decades. I've seen a lot. But that day in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom taught me something profound. Compassion isn't weakness. Judge Caprio's reputation for mercy, for giving second chances, isn't built on naivety. It's built on a conscious choice to see the best in people, even when that choice carries risk. And when someone violates that compassion, when they spit in the face of genuine mercy, the response isn't just judicial, it's personal. Because Judge Caprio doesn't just sit on a bench and apply laws mechanically, he invests his heart in every decision. That's what made Marcus Delaney's betrayal so devastating. He didn't just violate a court order, he broke the heart of a man who'd chosen to believe in him. Judge Caprio still presides in Providence Municipal Court. He still gives second chances. He still treats people with dignity and compassion. But I can tell you this, something changed that August morning. There's a shadow there now, a wariness that wasn't there before. Marcus Delaney tried to escape justice. What he actually escaped was his last chance at redemption, and he destroyed something precious in the process. Some betrayals can't be undone. Some trust once broken can never be fully restored. I was there. I saw it all. And I'll never forget the day Judge Frank Caprio's patience finally shattered.